Being a part of a university is such an interesting world. You're essentially part of building and running a small city, and that's definitely the case for the University of Texas here in Austin. Sometimes it can be hard to know what direction you need to take things. Do you treat it like a typical direct-to-consumer business? Do you treat it like a B2B? And how do you really know who the target customer is? These are all things that we dove in today with my guest, Emily Reagan, the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at the University of Texas, right here in Austin. She joined the university right at the start of the pandemic and during one of the worst winter storms you've ever seen. Snowpocalypse is what we called it. She learned a ton of things starting at this time, and the basic starting point, the biggest thing she really took away from the early days, relationships. She shares so much insight on this episode, not just about the university, but also her experience working at other brands, software companies, and the like. She had a lot of really cool things happen before joining UT. Emily was also one of the first guests in the studio this year, so this was super exciting for me and the Mission Squad here. You guys are going to get so much from this episode. Let's get into it. Before we dive into this conversation, I wanted to say thank you to our partners at Salesforce. We bring marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing. Now let's get into it. I want to ask you, what are you kind of most excited to talk about? There's a lot going on at UT, a lot in your role. Head of marketing, head of communications, it's encompassing a lot.
I think the strategic plan that we will launch in April is a huge part of my job. I'm on the advisory committee. I'm heavily involved in that effort. I'm heavily involved around the rollout of that. You know, I mentioned that I came into this role just about a year ago, and what the president and I want to do with this function is quite different than what it was built for originally. And so I think we are at such an interesting and exciting moment in our history as a university, in our city, in our state. The timing and the ingredients are really good for how do we take advantage of this? How do we position ourselves for really succeeding there? And so I'm developing a more comprehensive marketing and communication strategy that will ladder up to the strategic plan and that will tell that story of impact. I'm thinking about what organizational design and structure I need to support those efforts. Wow. You know, I've just hired a new level of leadership that didn't exist before. And so what we have here is, I think, we have an ambitious president who really wants to see us build on success and just kind of elevate.
I mean, for a lot of people, certainly in the US and certainly in Texas, I mean, there's, UT, UT is this tier one university. Look, it's of course it's a big deal here in Austin, but if you look at the university just from academia, from research, it remains this, it's such a unique brand in that it's not just a university. It's not just a place for research. It's so much more to that brand. And so I get excited about thinking, you and the kind of, like you said, like you and the president, right, coming together and being like, okay, let's burn the ships. What are we going to do here, right? I mean, and the impact of doing things like that at UT is massive. It doesn't just impact UT. This is this is huge. So I'd love to kind of get into what's some of the early conversation with you and the president. What's some of the things that you kind of were kicking around together about kind of, in some ways clearing the table and setting the board for this year? What was that conversation like? What are some of the things maybe you guys were connecting around?
One of the key things is that UT is an unbelievably big, decentralized entity. I describe it as an aircraft carrier. And, as an aircraft carrier, you're big and massive and you plot a course and the good side of being an aircraft carrier, or the positive of that, is like you can take a lot of fire and it doesn't really affect your course. We take a lot of fire. Higher ed institutions take a lot of fire in general. We take our fair share as well. But it also means that it's tough to shift course. But when you think about shifting that course and the impact that you can have, the size and the scale that we have as a university, we have more first gen students than probably any other university, because it's nearly 30% of our population, and our student population is 50,000. So, or excuse me, our undergraduates about 40,000. But we have just a huge the ability to impact at scale. When you look at our student population, we're third amongst our kind of AAU, American Association of University, and flagship publics around kind of the number and percentage of underrepresented students that we have at our university. And so we have the ability to really propel social mobility and knowledge and impact in a way that not many universities have.
Wow.
And so we talk a lot about that. And it's easy to just get caught, and I do every many days, just get caught in running the trains and fighting the battles and dealing with the press and dealing with social and who's mad about this and upset about this, because that's definitely a big part of navigating through the role. But when we talk about what we want to accomplish, we really want to have impact. And part of that from a marketing and communications perspective, we talk a lot about how do we create more unity in our messaging. The big decentralized university's tough to create unification around messages and around communications, and we're getting better at that. But there's always been this kind of like, well, there's the president's office, and then there's this other office, and this other group, and this other, and that's hard to really break through when everybody's kind of saying a little bit different. So the president has really been leaned into the fact that, like, we need to, as a leadership team, we need, we can have lots of debate and discussion and whatever, but we got to be on the same page, and then we got to all communicate the same.
I mean, the CMO role is in my opinion like the most interesting, unique role at the executive level. You have to be at this intersection of all the other core functions of business. You have to align with all the stakeholders. Then you at the university level, like you said, you've got years and years and years of relationships way before you. There's lots of funding, lots of money, lots of opinions. This is not just one people sitting in one space. This is, like you said, a pretty big decentralized historical experience. Now you've got to win these people over. You've got to come with a new plan, a new strategy. Not everyone's going to love it. And so I think the story that I make up is that it's maybe even a bigger battle for you, because there's so much entrenched relationships and the way things were, and so many people you have to influence and win over. And then I like how you go back to you and the president are aligned on the strategy, because you need him and he needs you to be able to really move it forward. But what's it like being at the intersection at the university level of like press and also internal stakeholders and team, and like how are you managing all that?
I hope I have more wins than losses. I don't keep a regular tally, but I do. I spent some time doing some leadership development work last week, and that was one of the things we did was like what are the wins? And because the losses and the things that don't go the way that you wish that they would have, or that blow up in your face with no warning and what have you, are tough, and they tend to take up your energy. But the reality is that we've also had a lot of really great wins and really great successes, and they don't have to be huge things. So I think it's important at the intersection to take a moment from time to time, and just probably daily. That's probably a practice I could be better at, is just kind of recapping, where did I win today? What do I want to do better? But really just being happy with the wins, because they're hard, they're usually hard fought, and not because the people I'm working with are difficult, but the issues are difficult. There's multiple sides to the issues, and inevitably, when you make this decision to go this direction, particularly in higher ed, more so, I see it more so than I did perhaps in the private sector, you have quite a bit of divergence in terms of opinion around whether or not that's the right answer.
Right.
And you could easily second guess yourself and not stick to your guns about, like, this is what we're going to do. So that's particularly hard, I think, to just get your head wrapped around, and when you're taking fire, and to be like, well, but this is where we're going. This is what we decided to do, and we know we're not going to make everyone happy. But then at the same time, it's like, where can you find places for compromise and for meeting people halfway, and providing different stakeholders a win in a different way. So it's definitely a balance.
What was like your first, and it's always interesting to hear this from marketing leaders and comms leaders, is like, what was your first 90 days like? What did you do your first 90 days in the role?
My first 90 days in the role, I met everyone on the team.
Okay.
That was really important. Of course, we were remote. So, and because I'd been working at UT, I knew a lot of the people that were on my new team and had met them personally.
That's good.
But there were definitely a number of people I hadn't. So I had a lot of Zoom calls with people I was meeting for the first time. And so the first 90 days of my job included a plan around and communicating our spring semester plans in the midst of a huge spike, a winter spike around Thanksgiving and Christmas that we were experiencing, that we walked into. It had been kind of a moderate fall, but we went into a winter spike, and so that was kind of what were we going to do about that. The second piece was we hired a new football coach, and the
Just
third
a big deal here in Texas, by the way.
big deal.
Yeah, huge.
And the third other big thrust was the impact that had on the university and our people. And so that was, and we kicked off our strategic plan in the middle of that. And I was dealing with attrition and hiring and, the usual kind of day-to-day stuff. But those three things, the kind of COVID spike, the football coach, and this winter storm, I would say were kind of the three big things that happened that we had to communicate and navigate around.
I mean, I mentioned this before when the snowpocalypse gets brought up, here in Austin, some of my friends that live here were on a grid with the hospitals, and so they never lost power and water. And, me at the time I was in Lakeway, nice big beautiful house in Lakeway, no power, couldn't leave our driveway. We had a fireplace, no wood. I had my 2-year-old daughter at the time. We had no power. We had to resort to burning some furniture in the fireplace because it was so cold. We had to put Visqueen in our living room, duct tape Visqueen, blocked us all in, brought their mattresses in living room, her and my daughter and then my roommate at the time. And we started, look, what can we burn? It was freezing. And so we did that. Then finally we got our cars out of the driveway after like day 2. But then in Lakeway, as you know, it's hilly. And so everyone's sliding off the road. Cops are like, you got to turn around. We're like, we have no food and we have no wood, so it was a crazy time. And I can imagine now, we still got to put a plan together and we still have to move this huge aircraft carrier, right? So how did you kind of level set? And I mean, all that's going on. I mean, I was in that with you in some of it, not putting a plan together and stuff, but what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of like navigate that? I mean, tumultuous time, as a leader and executive, and you still have to do this, but a lot's happening, a lot's going on.
It was such an interesting time because UT is a city. The other analogy I will make, or for what it is, it's a city. We have our own power source. We have people who live on our campus. We have facilities that we have to manage. We have our own police force. We have all of that, and so we have. So when the winter storm happened, we had people living on our campus, and fortunately, we have our own power source, so we didn't lose power. But we have all these people that live around our campus who didn't have power. And so we worked collectively to create warming stations so that we could bring people that were close to campus who could get there. There were several places around campus that we would open and that we provided food to students who didn't have meal plans, so they could get food. And so we had to communicate all of that. I mean, there were decisions made in student affairs and university housing and dining, whatever, about what we're going to open and how we're going to operate. But then our teams had to come together and had to communicate. I had people on my team who were working from their cars, on their phones, doing press. We had the biggest spike in our press coverage during the winter storm because of the experts that we have on energy.
Wow.
So we're pitching media on our experts to talk about what's happening.
Wow.
And getting huge coverage, for so many of our experts. So like, that's kind of this bright spot in, that we have this expertise. Sure. And that they turn to, the media turn to us to get the information. And so we were doing a lot of that kind of work. And then we had to, I think we sent out a message almost every day from the president to the community we were making kind of game, when we made the decision to close for the first couple of days, we didn't know that we were going to end up closing for the whole week. So it was a constant monitoring and checking in on what exactly, how dire the situation was. And it was obviously, it got way worse than anybody anticipated. And so we were constantly checking in and trying to figure out and bringing the right folks together to talk through, what do we do next? And what do we want to communicate? And so that was a really, the communication was really critical. And were there things that we got wrong or things that we could have done better? Absolutely. But overall, I thought the team came together incredibly well. And then one person on my team suggested to me, because as we got late in the week, and people had busted pipes and no power for 4 days and no food, and they were working in their homes, on their phones, in their cars, to keep things going for our students and for our operations and for our communications. And we asked the president if he would just make a few phone calls to a couple people that were really, doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
And I think he would tell you, he pretty much everybody he spoke with was overcome with emotion, with the idea that
Sure.
I think about that suggestion, and I was so glad that she made it. And I just was like, that's such a great,
Wow.
was such an important thing. And it wasn't, obviously we couldn't do that with everyone, but we did start to kind of create shout outs on our social media and things for people who are really going above and beyond. That's just what they do. That's what they do in their jobs. And they were kind of everyday heroes that were out there making it happen for those who needed food or power or just additional support on any number of things.
You were at Bizarre Voice before. Was it Bizarre Voice right before this role?
No, I was at McCombs School of Business.
Okay.
And so I came into UT through McCombs.
Okay.
And Jay Hartzell, who is now our president, was the dean at McCombs Business School. And so he hired me as the CMO at McCombs.
Okay, got it.
That's how we got connected.
Okay. So reflecting on your time at Bizarre Voice, because for those who don't know, Bizarre Voice is also a big presence here, and you were in leadership there and leading at the helm. What are some of the things that you cultivated, learned at Bizarre Voice that you're still doing in your role now as, head of marketing and comms at UT?
Well, I would just say continuation of lessons.
Uh-huh.
Relationships are really, really important. And marketing, the role of marketing in organizations is typically not the one calling the shots on the strategies or what we're doing or what we're not doing. But they're a critical in smart companies. They're obviously at the table, at part of those conversations, but they're not necessarily the lead. They're often a partner. They're an influencer, and particularly in a B2B organization, they're very much an influencer and a partner to the sales team. And I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed the relationship building with the sales team and kind of understanding their world a little bit better. I had been doing a lot of work in consumer marketing prior to that, so I hadn't really worked with a software sales team. And so that was kind of a new experience.
Yeah.
And but I think, and the thing there is do what you said you were going to do and build relationships, and because those are, that's who you're really there to help kind of make their job easier. And so I think that's just a really important thing, regardless of what function that you're in, is to understand who your internal customer is, and really being clear about how you can work together and how you can build trust and build relationship. And I think it's been really difficult in this environment because of not being together and moving into a new role where I was meeting a bunch of new people on Zoom, as opposed to having that relationship. But I think I continue to come back to investing in relationships and that being an important part. Bizarre Voice did a really great job also of celebrating success. So every Friday we would have what was called the Gong, which is a meeting where we'd all gather, and we did it across a bunch of time zones, because we had folks in Australia, we had folks in France and Germany and London, and as well as in New York and San Francisco and Austin. And so we stretched all those time zones, and we created a meeting where you had the people in Austin physically there, and then we would have the Life Size was the video conferencing tool we would use, and you'd have everybody kind of come in, and we'd get together on Friday morning and if you're a new hire, you got to introduce yourself. If you're, and then we would do celebrate wins. We would talk about successes in different parts of and then you get to go up and kind of bang the gong. I did add a gong at McCombs.
I was going to ask you if you did. Okay.
And
okay.
I did. We got one. We were, I would say, just kind of starting to get it going. I was kind of early in that. And that's something that I think is a really nice kind of symbolic thing. But I think, in lieu of having that in place right now, which we don't, but I think would be a nice thing to add, some sort of kind of physical emblem of how we celebrate success. It's also just being really, really clear and frequent with your thank yous. And telling people how much you appreciate their work. I do a lot of that because I know a lot of people on my team and other teams, particularly in this environment, have done above and beyond, have been working long hours for a really long time.
I love, I mean, this never gets old. In this role, I get to meet with the most amazing humans, right? Just like you, these marketing leaders and executives across the Fortune 100 and beyond. And it's awesome to hear, as a listener, also as, someone who studies leadership, as in leadership and myself. And so to hear you say things, and I've heard a lot of executives say like, of how you treat people and cultivating listening and some of these things, you think that, people that are sitting in these really high positions have done something secret superpower thing. And it's like, well, how did you get there? Oh, I listened and I was kind to people, and I aligned with stakeholders. And yeah, they're smart and brilliant, but it was just coming back to the table stakes of like being a really good human will get you as far as you want to go in this life. And so I love, like you said, saying thank you more often. Like there's some nuance, of course, there, but it's also, you're saying thank you. And it's amazing how that will build a foundation that you can then, okay, let's build a Marcom strategy. Let's do something. So in the note of, the vein of the Marcom strategy, talk us through some of the things that UT's setting up to do differently this year. Yeah, high level, as details as you want to get, but just talk about that new Marcom strategy.
So I would say that the communications team has been built and organized around managing our reputation through media, public relations, social media, issues management or diffusion, and somewhat just, I don't want to say reactive, because I think there's definitely a lot of proactive things that we do, but the team was really built to be focused on using those tools to maintain and build our reputation. What we haven't been focused on is as much as the marketing side of the house. So building our reputation through brand marketing, through brand storytelling, through more paid advertising. And there's definitely a long-standing sense that higher education is just that, is education, and marketing is this businessy term, and we're not a business, we're higher education. So does that marketing really matter? And I would say absolutely it matters. The state of Texas is graduating more high school seniors than probably any other state. We're one of the few states that is growing in our matriculation of high school students. And so we are a target. Many universities are coming to Texas to find their students. And so the competition for us is quite intense. It's intense with our own competitors in our backyard for the same reason.
That's right.
And scholarship money is incredibly, incredibly important to retaining or to recruiting and retaining the best and brightest students. So we have a competition for talent that is immense. It's also that way in the city of Austin for staff talent, for faculty talent. And not just in Austin, but around. And so we definitely are thinking about marketing in the talent kind of business for sure. I've heard from friends and alums, they don't see Texas as much nationally and internationally, and certainly it's well known, but they see other schools and other universities more proactively branding themselves through. I mean, a friend of mine asked me, like, when am I going to see a billboard in the airport? And so we just haven't really, and certainly our reputation and our awareness has been something that has carried the university for a long period of time, but that is not enough. And so I think what we'll see us do is build out more organizational structure and more strategies around more traditional marketing, building on the media relations and the social media and the reputation management we've been doing, kind of at our core, but connecting those dots and more proactively going after kind of building that brand, for the many different audiences and stakeholders, and what that means to the many different audiences, stakeholders. I think it will be much more intentional around that and investing in more of those types of programs.
Do you look at kind of when you think about the audience of UT, right? Is it students, grad students, alumni? Like what are kind of the buckets you look at for like the UT, brand in terms of who's the audience for UT?
Right. Excellent question. It's vast. It's definitely prospective students and families.
Mm-hmm.
It's current students.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I would say, I call it kind of an academic cluster, which is kind of faculty, researchers, grad students that are definitely postdocs, et cetera. That's kind of in that kind of, and there's obviously nuance in there, but there's a very kind of academic and research focused segment. There's our general campus community, our employees and our students just at large in terms of the campus. The Austin community of businesses, nonprofits, the city, that whole kind of, and that's an area where we have not been as proactive and intentional about building those relationships, and getting access and connecting with UT is very hard because there's so many different ways in, and we're very decentralized, and how do I get to the right person? So that's a huge part of what we're doing from a strategic planning perspective, is really wanting to build those tighter connections with our partners, with our community, with Austin and Texas. And so that's really an important part of it. So that's there's a lot in there, but
Sure.
it's certainly a external. And then I would say legislators and taxpayers.
You can think about that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely that's a very different audience than
Sure.
a prospective student or a business or an investor.
Mm-hmm.
So and they're equally important. They're obviously an important part of our funding source. They're an important part of our governing body. And so we're very, kind of that's key. And taxpayers. I mean, we obviously are the recipient of tax dollars. And so we have to demonstrate that we're using these dollars wisely. Obviously we get a lot more money now from other sources besides just the state, but we still we have to be good stewards, and so that's an important part. So that's kind of how I look at the different audiences.
So do you go as detailed in your role as looking at now this, maybe the new story, the new messaging that you're telling all of these audiences? Do you kind of look at, okay, because to me it's like there's so many modes of information coming at these people. There's email, there's all these things here. Are you looking at that at a high level and saying, okay, this is the message to this people, this is the message? Are you evaluating all of those kind of new stories?
I am.
Wow.
And I think that's amazing. An area where I think this is an area, and this is where I think we have huge opportunity, because we actually, how we deal with each of these different audiences and engage with it is very spread out across the university.
Right.
There's different groups that have ownership or relationship with those audiences across campus. So how do you know what the left hand and the right hand is doing? So some of what I've done from an organizational structure is bring in some units that were in other areas and kind of centralize, so that we can create some of those, so we can create a tighter connection there of how are we talking to this particular audience. The strategic plan and the key initiatives that come out of it are going to be the kind of the crux of how we move forward and how we set our sights on the future. And so, but how you communicate that and message that to a prospective student or a prospective employee versus to a taxpayer versus to the business community is very different. So that's something we will absolutely be doing, is building out kind of the core messages that we want to deliver to everyone.
Sure.
But how do you nuance and tweak those for these different audiences, and what proof points are you using that are different for students and prospective employees versus what you would tell a legislator or a taxpayer, or what you would tell the media. And so anyway, so that whole effort is, we're about to kind of embark on that, and of rethinking that. And part of what I've been doing is trying to build the organizational infrastructure to support that. I have good, some direct reporting and some dotted line reporting relationships, and in other cases, just good collaboration and partnership with communications and marketing folks across campus. So, but definitely that's a priority, is to, when we're talking to certain audiences or stakeholders, we need to all be singing from the same song sheet.
You talked about kind of hiring a new team. and centralizing some things. Are those connect two things connected? Hiring the new team and then bringing some things in. Talk about this new team a bit, and also just kind of your process for building a high performing team. Because I don't know who the team is, and I would imagine if you're involved in bringing some people together, they've got to be amazing. So maybe talk us through what that looked like and the specialties you looked for and kind of how you evaluate bringing people on.
Well, it starts with recognizing that I was never going to be able to accomplish what the president wanted to accomplish with the current number of people and the structure that we had. But I had to have a moment to kind of live in it for a while and then take a step back and do some benchmarking, talk to some of my peers. The higher ed marketing and communications community is unbelievably strong, and they're very supportive of one another. And so there's always someone to talk to about what they're doing and to share and learnings from. So I'm definitely tapped into the community and found out that I was kind of missing a layer of leadership. And part of that was because job before me was a chief communications position that was not a vice presidential role. And so when we moved when I came into the job, I proposed the president that this be a vice president role at the university because it's that at most universities. And by creating a layer and making it a vice president, that then opened up layers of leadership that I could add because of the room, the headroom.
Okay.
And so that's just kind of an organizational challenge. And so what I noticed from other peers is that they had assistant and associate vice presidents over big parts of the portfolio. Well, I had 2 directors that managed people.
Wow. Wow.
And so I wanted to think about, okay, well, so I had to think about where do I want to take this organization? And then what parts of the portfolio, what portfolios of communications and marketing do I want to have? And so I ended up with a team structured around 3 assistant vice presidents. So one who's really focused on the academic side of the house, and our academic operation, our academic communications, which includes research and the colleges and schools and all of the provost office, all of that type of work. And then I have a university communications, an AVP for university communications. That's all of the administrative and campus and operational and kind of PR and kind of crisis management, issues management, kind of general communications. And then I have an AVP of marketing who I just hired. And so I've got 2 positions in place. One I'm still looking for.
Okay.
And so that was kind of one, but I had to go look around and see what other people were doing. And then I had to go pitch to the president that I needed the funds to go hire these people. And he graciously agreed. And I've been going down that path. And so I'm almost done.
Were they on the outside or were they already at or kind of inside the UT system?
Well, I ended up, for the academic position, I wanted to bring somebody from UT. Okay. I felt like it was important that we have somebody internally. So I did make an internal hire there, and I didn't open it up to external hires. The marketing job, I opened it up and I looked at external and internal, and I ended up hiring an internal person.
Okay.
And so I have 2 really strong AVPs that came from UT, and then like I said, I'm in the process of looking at an AVP of communications, and I imagine I will end up. I don't know. I imagine I'll end up going externally for that one. I'm currently working on a search with a firm.
When you, in terms of like looking at the funnel for, like just demand gen, right? Like just in terms of just the student, bringing new students into the university.
Right.
Did you dive into that and change much there in terms of the plan, in terms of demand gen and how they're attract new students? And are you getting pretty deep in the weeds there? Or was that system kind of already running and gunning and you're like, let's not mess with that, it's not broken?
Well, it wasn't part of my team initially. So there was a marketing and communications effort around admissions that sat in another organization. One of those, again, kind of decentralized. Yep. And so, however, it was, I have since brought it into my team. It was one of those that felt clear from a lot of different lenses that a good function to bring into the university marketing and communications team. So I did bring that in. I brought that in over the summer. And so just recently, presidential change and a provost change, we've had some transition in leadership on the admissions front. And so we've kind of agreed that it's a great time to reevaluate how we're doing what we're doing. And we certainly, during the pandemic, where many other universities struggled, we were very fortunate. We had some of our biggest classes. I think to some degree that first year in the pandemic, people stayed closer to home where they might have gone away. So we benefited from that. We've continued to just kind of stay focused on a steady drumbeat of marketing and communications that we do in the admissions area. But we literally that's like one of my hot topics right now with the team is we have a really great opportunity. We've just done all the we're in the process of admitting the students. All the application closed December 1st, so we're in the process of admitting students now, and then we'll have to yield them. But now is the time to rethink how do we do our demand gen for next year. And we're having some really fun conversations about ideas that we have. There's a lot of openness to new ideas.
Cool.
And so I'm excited about that's a lot of my background comes from that type of marketing. So of course I'm really excited about that. And I have some great folks on my team who are excited about that as well. Some who are newer, some who've got some history working with that. So they have some perspective. So I think we're about to give that a shot in the arm.
It's something that we can talk about. Just kind of innovation and like things that you're, either interested in experimenting around or already experimenting around this. We're hearing a lot from marketing leaders around AI and machine learning and AR, VR, and interesting things. Of course, there's all this talk about Web3 and the metaverse and NFTs. I'd love to kind of get your just thoughts on all of those things. Innovation, just kind of in general. Where are you in the kind of UT team innovating and trying new things? And then what's your take on, the metaverse and Web3 and NFTs and this whole blockchain world that we're moving into?
My take on that is that UT is going to be, from a research and an impact perspective, at the forefront of those. And that's really where the story is at UT, is in our research and our innovation and the things that we're commercializing and working with businesses on. And, we have centers around AI and blockchain and all of that type of innovation that's happening. And so we are the hub of that. We are wanting to connect more with our Austin community and the Texas community to, again, be partners and to share and to innovate together. And but that's a huge part of what we're doing at the university. And as a marketing and communications team, it's our job to tell those stories. We are, I would say, from a marketing and communications kind of technology standpoint at UT, we're in, I would say, a little behind where we should be. And I think I put a lot of that on the decentralized nature of our organization. And that's one of the things that I really want to focus on, is building out a stronger kind of center around digital innovation and experience. We have pockets of it in different places where, particularly around student-related activities and things, we developed an app for COVID. So when you come to campus, you take a little symptom check and all that kind of stuff. So we developed that in-house. It's what you show when you go to testing, so they can make sure that you've filled out all the forms and all the stuff. So we've been doing some of that kind of stuff internally. I think we've got some really great opportunities in using new technologies to connect with our constituents. But we've got some additional foundational things that we need to get our arms around. And that'll definitely be part of the work that I do. I think, part of our strategic plan is very much focused on IT and what we need, what technology we really need in place to be successful. And I continue to say, it can't just be back end. It also has to be front end.
Yes.
It has to be marketing technology. We need better coordination and scale around our marketing tech stack and things like that. And so those are some of the things that I'm really thinking about. And we experiment and we think about adding new social platforms. We also, I would say, we haven't necessarily been super out on the risk curve for that kind of. I don't think higher education in general is super far out on the risk curve for those type of technologies. A lot of our students obviously are on TikTok. We're not on TikTok
yet or ever.
I think that's a question. I think there's certainly some hesitation because of some of the privacy and security issues related to TikTok. The other thing is, do our students really want us out there and engaging with them on TikTok? I don't know. Is that really, that's kind of more, that's what they like to communicate with one another on? Do they really want communications from us, smart video. We joke about it as an executive team because we're all older and how we can be cool like the kids and get on TikTok and we're like, do they really want us there? And so so we talk about it.
Sure.
And I would say during the pandemic we have leaned heavily into our social platforms with people not being around as much. I mean, that was such a huge community building part, and we have good we have a ton of social platforms across the university, perhaps too many, and but we have a council that works together to try to create some standardization of best practices and to connect the dots when when we have a particular announcement or program, like which channels are going to lead on that and which channels are going to amplify. So when you've got a huge it's just massive. I mean, we've got so many websites, we've got so many social channels, and so I certainly would love to bring a bit more structure to that, but also make sure that the different audiences and entry points into the university are not robotic, because the it's just so vast. So you can't serve everybody individually, but you do need some flexibility.
In terms of the support that you have now with, of course, the budgets at UT and the things that it's like, to me, it's like now you've got this ability to put things in place, hire people you need, build out new infrastructure, buy the technology you need, test the others, and stay on the cutting edge. Do you feel like that, what's your relationship with velocity and just moving fast now? Do you feel like now you've got all this support that maybe you didn't have before in other roles and other places, and now you have like this space that you get to kind of play with and create? Do you feel like you've just got that creativity and support that's not unlimited, but virtually like you can do what you want?
It's getting there.
Okay.
I think so. Key to hitting our stride from a velocity perspective is going to be getting the new marketing communications plan that aligns with our strat plan in place, and the org structure that we have to support it. I mean, we have, like everyone else, been dealing with attrition and people coming and going, and so in a time where it's just been the workload has been taxing, and so we're kind of coming out of that and starting to think about, all right, where are our next places to invest, and where do we want to build? So I feel like we're right on the precipice of being able to really step on the gas and go do these things that we've been talking about doing. And it's just it takes time and certainly working in a bureaucracy, it takes time to get things approved and things like that. But I think that I know that putting a clear plan with, I'm going to go do these 5 things first in front of the president, will yield an answer that I'll be able to move on. May not be everything all at once, but I have no doubt that he is committed to seeing us build this out the way that we want to build it out. It's just a matter of how we cadence it.
In terms of the data that you have access to, right? I mean, you've got all this data, historical data, certainly data you have all the data coming in. It's gold, right? It's the oil, right? And so how much are you looking at data, historical data, current data? Like, how much are you evaluating that to kind of dictate what you're putting in motion moving forward? Because it's like, to me, it's like you could have a dashboard. I mean, specifically you. I mean, there's so much you could look at. Engagement and all these different audiences and all these different things, and how do you kind of assess that? And because like, to me, that's a whole fire hose that you could choose to turn on or all. It's like, how do you kind of deal with all the data? What are you doing with that?
Gosh, the data is, I mean, you could spend all day in the data, and we're going through some substantial efforts as a university to integrate and provide the right tools to access the data in an easier way. And so there's a lot of work going on around that. So, but the data that we have just on our social media platforms and our media reach and our website traffic and our engagement related to things is voluminous, as you can imagine. And so, we certainly, I'm looking at things, certainly periodically, quarterly. How are we doing? How are these, kind of these sites performing? How are these channels working for us, et cetera? But I'm also, and that, I think that helps you. The data is not telling us that we're that there's something over here that we're not doing. And I think what you have to do is you also have to combine the data with the hard data and the quantitative data with the qualitative data, the listening and the conversation and what are you hearing. And so I think we're doing a lot better at that than I felt like we were when I first started. And I think some of that's just a result of just kind of resources and all the things that people are trying to do. But I do think you can get paralyzed by the data. And I loved the Malcolm Gladwell book, Blink.
Oh, great one.
Right. Where the key is like, there's so much data, but what's actually important?
Yep.
What is actually telling you something?
Yep.
And so one of the great pieces of data that we have is how do we perform against our peers in terms of media reach and impressions and share of voice. And we do incredibly well. And that's a story that we probably don't tell as much as we should, but we really, and that's a really affirming piece of data that I've looked at kind of periodically, that it's like, okay, this is good. This is, in other places we may have gaps or we may not be where we want to be, but we do have some good affirming data that show we're on the right track.
In terms of just like metrics and like levers that you look at, what are some of the things that you're looking at? Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's monthly. What are some, because in your role, again, head of comms, head of marketing, what are some of the big buckets and, things that you're looking at on a weekly, monthly, bi-monthly basis?
Well, I'm thinking, are you saying means in terms of data or just in general?
Yeah, and in general, like what are the numbers, metrics, levers that you look at that you're like, okay, got to go spend some time there.
Right.
That's doing great. That's not, like, because to me, you got to look at a lot of things.
Right.
What are some of the things that you're paying attention to?
Well, definitely paying attention to admissions related data, the application data, the enrollment data.
Okay.
That's going to be something that I'm going to be paying much closer attention to, particularly in this admission cycle.
Okay.
So that's really key. I will, somewhat tongue in cheek, one of the key dashboards and data that I look at is our COVID dashboard every day. What's our positivity rate? How's Austin doing? How many people are in the hospital? That is something that, now obviously I'm not making policy about that.
Right.
I'm involved in the conversations about that, but it's not something that I control or am alone in doing.
Sure.
But I am communicating
weekly
with our campus. We send out a newsletter with an update on all the things that are going on, and also we're doing other types of communications. And so understanding the backdrop and the context in which we're operating is really important. And that's just such a critical part. I look forward to the days that it is not, but it is absolutely a critical part of what I look at every day. And so the other thing is that we are focused on ensuring that we're spending enough time telling good news stories.
Thank you.
It is a conversation we have a lot, and it's not that we haven't been telling good news stories, but we've all been pretty inundated over the last couple of years with not great news, between all of the pandemic related news, the political related news, the social justice and the racial reckoning conversations and the news around that. I mean, it's been a lot, and we have a lot of great things to say about what we're doing as a university, somewhat related to those things as well as to other things. So I think just really making sure that we're talking about our strategies to get those stories out. The media wants to tell a story often that's a bit more controversial than a good news story, but there are outlets, there are ways, and we are really intentional about, how many stories a month can we get out there, 10 to 12 stories locally and statewide, where we've got our researchers, our experts, our enrollment stats, our progress on diversity inclusion issues. What do we have to say, and really making sure that we're getting out there and telling those good news stories.
I love it. Awesome. Okay, let's get into a couple fun questions. These questions are, I would say, have you ever done improv before? Improv?
I've not done
Okay.
improv.
So the thing about improv, they tell you, is like, when you're in improv, get out of the head, get in the heart. Answer from the heart. Don't think about it too much, just answer. Okay. So I want to answer these questions. Just answer whatever comes up. Okay. First question is, a good idea that you had recently was?
To listen to podcasts in the morning while I'm getting ready for work as a way to get my news and information.
Love it. Finish this sentence. Courage is
contagious.
Love that. A time when you made a powerful choice was?
When I decided to move to Washington, D.C.
Any context there?
I had a job opportunity. Had been living in Dallas for a long time. I knew Dallas wasn't my long-term plan. I loved DC when I was there as an intern when I was in college, and I had an opportunity to take a job and move myself across country, which was a bit of a risk,
Yeah.
but I felt calculated and with good kind of safety net provisions if things blew up.
That's great.
And it was, I spent 6 years in the area, and it was hands down some of my best years.
I love that. Okay. Finish this sentence, please. What I love and appreciate about myself is
My self-awareness.
Hmm.
Like many leaders, particularly women leaders, I tend to be a bit hard on myself, but I prefer to be a little harder on myself than not hard enough. So I think finding that balance, and I think my self-awareness is key on kind of taking the temperature and recognizing when I'm over
Got it.
berating myself for
Yeah.
this, that, and the other.
That's good. Okay. When I want to feel more joy, I
Take a walk.
share that one with you. What are you secretly curious about?
I am always very curious about what lies underneath the ocean. I am jointly curious and terrified
Okay.
by what is under the water.
Oh, I love that answer. That's fantastic.
Took me a minute, but I got
That's
there.
good. Okay. Last question. I know that I am strong because.
I am so blessed that I had amazing, loving parents who set me on, I think, a really great course to be a kind and tolerant and creative person. And they fostered that, and they gave me that at a very young age. And that is where a lot of where I get my strength is that upbringing.
That's awesome. Awesome. Emily, thank you so much for being here. This was the best part of my week for sure. And just thank you so much for being here. This was incredible. Learning about your perspective and your experience is just insane. I feel like we need a couple more hours to go there, but this was awesome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I love doing this kind of thing.
Thanks again to Salesforce for making this show possible. To learn more, head over to salesforce.com/marketing.